selling is not selling. But what he's getting at is, and I think this is an important thing, is there is a point at which you tell, but early on what you really want to do, the first meeting is just to say, look, I'm coming in, you know a little bit about what we're working on.
Yeah.
I want to understand more about you. Can I find, let's sit down, let me, it's like you're a doctor coming in, you're solving a problem.
Hi, fellow founders and anyone that's listening to this podcast. I'm Suwira, co-founder of Aleph Tech. And basically, we sell B2B software for chemical manufacturing plants. Today, I'll be chatting with Kris Childress, the mentor in residence in NUS Enterprise. And today, we'll be talking about how can we better improve sales processes for B2B big ticket sales. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast and hopefully you will learn something useful from this podcast. How are you, Kris?
Good.
Thanks.
How are you doing today?
Amazing. Thanks
Good,
for having
good,
me today.
good.
Just to catch up again.
Yeah.
So, maybe just a little bit of context again, Kris, just to refresh. But basically, we are selling a process optimization software for, multinational companies, usually in the chemical and pharmaceutical sectors.
Okay.
And, these are the B2B sales that usually in the range of $50,000 to $100,000 annual recurring fee.
Okay.
So, since, these big ticket sales, the process tends to be harder, lengthier, and, we can need to get some of your advice as well.
Okay.
On how can we do this better, right?
All right. Well,
So,
I did not quite that big a ticket, but I did do big ticket sales and software for a number of years in the U.S. and B2B, anywhere up to like 50,000 USD, but it was a one-off license fee with some support fees after it. So the new model now is that everyone typically license it on some sort of a subscription,
Right.
or pay per use or something like that on an ongoing basis. I guess when I look at any sales, and this includes big ticket sales, I always step back, particularly though when you get into more expensive products and you get into more complex products. People don't like to be sold. They want to be helped to buy.
Right.
And so a lot of times I look on anytime I'm doing, particularly in this, is it's a very consultative kind of sales role.
Right. Okay.
And you're trying to identify, just very quickly, you're trying to say, who can I really help as quickly and easily as possible? And what's the fastest way to help them? And of course, part of the process of helping them is that they have to license my software. My software is the cornerstone
Right.
of the help. I may give them some more besides that, the cornerstone of it. So, broadly speaking, if you kind of always reframe what you're doing in that way, and occasionally I did consultative sales. I'd come in with people and I would say, look, a couple times I came back to people and said, I've looked at what you're doing. And initially I thought, it would be but actually for whatever reason, it's not a good fit for what we have. And I would suggest, you look over here. And, I remember one time our sales manager said that you're really a bad salesman. I said, well, no, not really. Because I said, these are probably not going to there'd be very hard sales.
Right.
And they probably won't really stick. So I'm always looking in perspective of what do they need.
Right.
So anyway, give me some more granular questions. Where are some of the sticking points that you find in the sales process?
But the thing that you mentioned earlier, makes sense in terms of, you need to find someone who, needs the product they're selling.
Right.
Don't sell to someone who is, the product might not stick, right? So
Right.
that gives us the segue into the first question, Kris.
Okay.
So how do you think is the best way to identify, the customers who actually need your solutions? People say you need to find the right customers.
Right.
You don't sell it to everyone across the market that you're targeting. So maybe the first thing is how to find these leads of potential customers, and maybe how do you go about acquiring them?
So usually you come up with it, you'd say, you can almost sit down on a board and write out some of the things that are going to be a given. So for example, and yours is similar to mine, if you're selling something that's going to be, say, $50,000 to $100,000 a year, you're probably not selling it to a very small company. So you're probably going to say, I know it's not really worth talking to the very small little mom and pop operations. I'm probably talking with the current product to companies of a certain size.
Right.
And you may say, and again, I have to look at your situation. I mean, also sometimes it's like, I want a company of a certain minimum size, but I also find occasionally if I get into the very biggest companies in the industry, and we found this before, sometimes they're so big they have their own internal organizations that are creating products for them that are similar to what you sell. And you have to be sensitive to that fact. So I remember going in one time to a really big company in the U.S. that I thought was I thought a tremendous opportunity. And I went in and gave a presentation, and first I asked, well, who's around the table? And I found several of the guys were actually their internal people who were creating products that the company would use, their own tools that were similar to what we were selling. And I remember asking the guys, I said, so what, we're selling a product that basically does what your group is developing. So what are you here for? Well, we just want to see what you're doing and see if we get some insights into how to make what we're doing better. So it's like, okay, but my job is not, I'm thinking, I didn't say that. My job is not to educate you. So again, you have to sit down and say, is there a certain size?
Right.
And that usually is a real quick filter. So I'm not going to talk to really small companies, maybe, depending on the industry. I'm not going to talk to the really biggest companies.
Yeah.
I'm going to find that Goldilocks zone in between. Then, of course, the other thing, also fundamental, is like, what value are you creating for the company, and which companies are going to get the greatest value out of it? And so I know initially when I was working with Aleph back in GRIP, you were looking at something that would be, if I recall, generally reducing costs, downtime, operating efficiencies,
That's right. Yeah.
cost of replacing equipment, and you had measured that. I think now, as you've worked on this, you're finding increasingly the big ticket item is energy, both because energy is a major cost for a lot of companies, but also because increasingly, because of the carbon issues, if you use energy, increasingly you're going to have to pay a tax on that in many areas because of carbon tax. So there's this huge effort by companies to reduce their energy footprint and their carbon footprint. So that makes sense. So again, you'd have to say, okay, where are the big energy and carbon footprints? So I'll kind of do an analogy. I worked one time with software, and it was used actually if you're doing formulation of food products.
Okay.
And what we found is actually some food products, they did need formulation, but either they had a really well-established ways of doing it, or they were so low cost that even if you saved the money, it was so minuscule that it really wouldn't justify it. And so we finally arrived at several industries that were really good. And from those industries, we found the ones I remember working on the most were meat processors and people making processed cheese. And again, as you look at that, you would say, okay, and then when I would look at, you begin to segment that down and you'd say, okay, the people that are making meat, it doesn't generally pay for us to talk with someone making less than, let's say, 50,000 pounds or 25,000 kilos, because even if you help them a lot, the benefits are going to be so small, it's hard for them to justify what you're doing.
Right.
So you want to kind of find the metrics on that area. And by the same token, you'd also want to work with maybe someone that was making something high value like a pepperoni versus maybe something low value like a chicken sausage or Spam or something where there's, there's not a high price product. So even if you save them money. So again, you start looking at that and you segue, you say, I want to really move as much as possible to spend more of my time talking with people where I think I can make a major impact. That's just generically. So certain size, a certain type of business, and then beyond that, you really have to look at how you're going to qualify them. In some cases, you may want to look and say, what's the journey the customer has made?
Right.
Particularly when you have sales, then you go back and look at the sale and you say, so what's interesting about it? Are there general things that I might learn from this sale that I can apply later? So for example, and I'm just giving these generic, maybe you'll find that your best possibility is someone who's already tried something before and it didn't work.
Okay. Yeah.
Or maybe your best opportunities for someone who's looking at a number of opportunities and you're catching them at that early point where you can say, I know you're looking at 5 different things. We have a better thing. Versus you've already tried something and failed and never did work, and we have a better thing to replace it. So you really kind of have to understand the industry and where you fit in that. And then I think you have to be able to come up with a way to connect that value that you're providing in a very quick and simple way to the people you want to talk to.
Right.
And that's why, our classic one would say, what would it mean to you if you could save, a penny a pound on your product? And this guy says, I'm making $1 million a week. It's not rocket science to figure out that, wow, $1 million, if I'm making £1 million a week and it's a penny a pound, then, I can 50 weeks a year of operation. Wow, that's a lot of money.
That's right.
And then suddenly they may argue that, well, we can't save all of it using your software, but you'd say, yeah, and we're not saying our software is to do the whole thing. You may have to do other things, but our software, we say it's really the essential first piece. Only when you know what you need to do, then you may need to re-engineer some other parts of your process, but this is essential. You can't re-engineer your process and then later have the software that tells you what to do or helps you to make your decisions.
That's right.
So again, if they think about that, and so that's what the qualification process is. I begin to say, the basic, what's the, and I think we do like the total addressable market and grip, and you take it down. Now you're down to your obtainable market, and so you're now refining what you call your obtainable market. Is saying my really obtainable market, my addressable market is this, and I'm really refining that. So maybe originally you thought, hey, all these large chemical plants, but now you're saying, oh no, it's this group of chemical plants. Just like I was doing, it's this group of meat plants or this group of cheese processors. And I know pretty much if I talk to people outside that, there's a relatively lower chance of a hit. I might carry on those conversations occasionally because that's how I learn and look at new opportunities. But my real sales work is I'm going to try to focus on the people where I can have the impact. Right size, right type of company, and hit them at the right point kind of in their decision process, or if you can find them. And the first thing in terms of the size and the kind of business they're in, you may be able to find that in, by looking online before you talk to them. The other thing you may only find out, you have to kind of call up and start qualifying them a bit.
I agree.
Yeah,
Yes. That is a good starting point, right? Like trying to find out what's the size and, whether they are within the optimal market I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But maybe going a little bit deeper in that is like firstly, when you mentioned about finding the right time in the decision process, that's something that, a little bit might be a bit hard to do because you'll need to have certain knowledge in their decision process.
Right.
And secondly is finding the right people to talk to from that organization, right?
Okay.
Which is probably one of the challenges that I think many startups or company will face as well.
Okay.
Do you have any suggestions, how
Well, the one that
to
we've
go about
talked
this?
about before, and I call it, I use the term, I call it high touch sales.
Right, yeah.
There's high tech and there's high touch, which means I meet you, I have connection with you, I talk with you. And generally the way to have high touch sales are, one, you have an introduction from someone, you know someone who knows them, it says they've got a problem, or, you make that kind of first person. I think you mentioned you've had some opportunities like that before. That's great. That's a warm path. Hopefully you can get in and then you can ask questions. You can kind of further qualify their opportunity. The other way, of course, is to go to places where these folks come together and share their problems. One of those is something like a trade show. I think that's particularly, we found that was a very important place to go. Even though it's probably maybe in the digital world it's becoming a little less important, but still, if someone's going to spend a lot of money, they're probably going to be going and looking at what's available and what's being shown at trade shows in their industry.
Right.
So, for example, if you're in water treatment, you go to the World Water Week in Singapore. If you're in meat processing, you go to the Fleischmachers, which is a huge biannual one in Germany. If you're in food tech, you might go to the Food Technology. So you always find it and try to understand where those are. Now, you can go and exhibit there. If you don't have enough money to exhibit there and you want to spend a little less money, I've had guys just go in and attend. They'll pay to attend those, and then they just kind of move around and find out what's going on and talk to people. Again, it's not as good. Generally, you need to have a booth and a presence.
Right.
So that's one way. The other thing is to look for digital versions of that. So, for example, I found people sometimes will go on and find a discussion group on, say, like LinkedIn or another area and say, okay, here's where these guys are coming together and they're sharing their own questions. Now, again, you want to be careful, a little sensitive. You don't just kind of come in and start pitching your product, but you're listening, and maybe if you want to, you find a certain thread, you might offer some, it's great. That's, you're talking about energy. A lot of people have looked at a lot of areas. One of the things we're working with, we found companies are looking, software is a great way to help with that. And I wonder if anyone else here has been looking at software solutions. So you almost kind of enter the community. Don't troll. You're not a troll. You're really trying to add to the conversation, but the inner community. And then eventually there may be a case where you just come in and say, I'm I'm happy to talk with anybody. I notice a lot of people have been dealing with this issue. Let me share a white paper we've done or something that may be a benefit. And that's, again, where you have to start saying we're sharing a bit more thought leadership with what you're doing. Then the third way, and again, this is more of an intermediate, and it's also part of the process that I mentioned, and I've had some companies do that, is look at putting on seminars and webinars.
Right.
And again, I know that seems intimidating sometimes at the beginning, but in effect, you already are building up some knowledge and some understanding. And it's also a non-threatening way to say, I want to put together a webinar on, what are the impacts of the upcoming, carbon taxes on Indonesia, something where you have some knowledge about. You may do this yourself. If you get a little more advanced, sometimes people will actually maybe pay to pull in an expert in the space to come in and talk. But again, it's more like we're having a conversation, and then as a part of that, we're going to share what we do as a part of that, because we figure it's logical. You've worked with these problems, and obviously there are lots of things you can do, but at the end of the day, here's one of the things we've been working with people on. So if you want to talk to us, that's fine, but you begin to qualify, and hopefully the people that come and attend that are the people that are looking for solutions, and they're your starting point versus you're kind of forcing yourself into an organization and trying to find that person and who they are. Because you're generally going to need to reach someone for big ticket sales. You generally need to get to someone fairly senior within the organization, but maybe not the most senior person. So you can't just kind of contact the CEO, although I've done that before. You do a cold call to the CEO. And then that's the last way, and I've done that actually a number of cases. The other way is to do some push, and you say, I don't know who in the organization I need to talk to, but I've actually gone occasionally, and if I can't find any other way in, I might send an email to the CEO and just say, we've looked at your company. We realize that you're probably wrestling with this issue because everyone is very brief. Everyone is. We would appreciate the opportunity to talk to someone in your organization who may be working on this, because we have a unique solution, and it's already being used by, already being used by these other companies. It's kind of the new thing. And sometimes I've had situations where I've done that, and the CEO will look at it, and his job is basically to help the company, and hey, he wants to make money, save money, stay out of trouble, whatever. He'll just send it downstream, two levels down, to the guy that's actually handling that. And not only will that guy take your call, he may actually call you.
Precisely.
Because this is the guy that signs his paycheck and okays his bonuses. So I'm just saying there, you have to begin to think creatively how to get into that. But part of it, in the end of the day, to maybe long story short, is you almost need to start moving in and becoming part of the community.
Agree.
So the last thing I'll do, and this is, again, I'm just throwing out some ideas, not that these are exhaustive, there are others, is I actually, as it reached a certain point, I became invited in one industry to be a speaker at some conferences and class and seminars and things. And I would just go in and be a speaker. I might pay my own way. Sometimes in one case, they actually would pay my way because they paid for the cost of travel of all the conference speakers, which was a great bonus.
Right.
Rarely do you get someone to pick up your expenses to do sales. But I would go in, and again, I would go in as a very educational. I wasn't pitching my product.
Right.
I'm talking about how we're solving this class of problems using my technology and maybe other technologies. But at the end, my presentation is such a way that a lot of them are interested. And I remember going to one of those conferences and showing it to a group of people. And then afterwards, everyone meets at the bar, and one of the guys calls me over, and we have a beer together, and he says, I really want to talk to you because we're trying to solve exactly the problem that you talked about in the seminar today. And I have credibility because I'm not a sales guy anymore. I'm really looked on as I'm someone with knowledge that can help them in that area. So again, these are all sorts of things to think about, but it always comes back to you need to sort of begin to develop a hit list of the companies that you're looking at and saying, I know who they are.
Right.
And if I hear from that, I want to talk to those guys.
That makes sense.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that really helps to, paint a picture of how or what are some of the tactics.
Yeah.
To
and it's not exhaustive.
Yeah.
You'll come up with others, but these are some ways I found that
for sure.
do that.
It's the fundamentals, right?
Yeah.
And how to go about it. But yeah, that's very interesting. So what happened next, right? So after you find the right company,
Okay.
the right people as well to speak with. So I guess the next process is to talk to them. right? Well, maybe like after you mentioned that you have already gone through on warm leads, and when you're trying to say that, okay, I have a solution in this. So when you are going to that sales pitch, how would you suggest, a person like me to structure the sales pitch? What are the things that I should say and I should not say during the pitch itself?
Okay.
You know,
There's a famous sales trainer in the U.S. named Brian Tracy. If you ever look up his stuff,
Brian
it's
Tracy.
interesting. He's very practical.
right.
And he has this saying he always says. He says, and when he presents this in a class, he makes everyone repeat it after him. He says, repeat after me. And they go, telling is not selling. And everyone goes, oh, no, repeat it. Telling is not selling. But what he's getting at is, and I think this is an important thing, is there is a point at which you tell, but early on what you really want to do, the first meeting is just to say, look, I'm coming in, a little bit about what we're working on.
Yeah.
I want to understand more about you. Can I find, let's sit down, let me, it's like you're a doctor coming in, you're solving the problem. So, tell me about your company. You'll come up as you get more experience. You'll have better questions to ask, but you really want to qualify them. Again, maybe confirm the size, where the company is, the nature of the problem, what they've tried before.
Right.
And they may say, hey, we haven't tried anything before, this is a nightmare, or we've tried this thing already, and we've spent, I think you mentioned one of the companies, we've spent a lot of money, and we're actually spending more money on the solution than it's saving us, which is not really a sustainable kind of approach to doing things. So we're really looking for something else. Or you may find, occasionally that in the end of the qualification process, like I said, sometimes you may go, I don't think these are guys I need to work with right now. There's too many opens, there's too much, and I need to sort of KIV, but I'm not going to actively pursue sales.
Okay,
And I've actually had that with guys. I said, I think you guys probably ultimately need our product, but right now I feel like you've got some other things you're working on.
Right.
Why don't I call you back in about maybe 6 months or so, and let's talk again. I think because these things need to be sorted out, and then I think it's easier for you to focus.
Yeah.
It's almost like playing hard to get in dating. You do that, and
That's
then
true.
that guy's coming. No. In other words, once they know I'm not trying to hard sell them, then it almost makes it they're more interested in, because they're used to guys pushing, and I'm like, no, I'm here to solve your problem, so I don't want to do it. So anyway, you understand where they are, and then at that point, you may even sometimes, depending on the circumstance, you may say, I can give you some things. Let me follow up now and I want to put something together that really addresses your specific issues.
Yeah.
Or you may have something that's fairly generic that you can give then. Depends on how you read and how this industries are. So as an example, when I would do that work in food formulation, what we would typically do is we would ask, maybe before the first meeting or after the first meeting, can we get a copy of one of your recipes that you make a lot of, along with the specs for that? And then we would plug them into our system, and we run a test formulation. And we'd say, okay, here's how yours runs now, and it's costing you $1.10 a pound, okay? And we run it through our system, and it reformulates it and does optimization, and it's $1.07 a pound. That's 3 cents a pound savings. And again, if we extrapolate that across your total production, it's this. And maybe that's too high, maybe it's too low, but at least it gives you an order of magnitude. And then we have a follow-up meeting. And by that point, they're interested because you've given them something concrete to hang their hat on. And again, you may not have that capacity yet to do that, but anything you can do like that to help them sort of taste a little bit of what the product does before they use it. So when you talk about low-end software, a lot of times they do free trials, or limited, 7-day free trial, or a 1 month free trial, and you get to try it. And it's harder probably for what you guys are doing because it's more complex.
Yeah.
But if you can figure out ways to simulate a little bit of that and let them experience some level, or at least sense how good this is going to be for them, that tends to move the process along.
So yeah, thanks for that, Kris. Maybe a little bit more on handling objections, right?
Okay.
Sure. I really like the point that we mentioned earlier that not to sell them when they don't need it, right?
Yeah.
Tell them that it may be hard to catch.
Yeah.
Maybe 6 months later, so on and so forth. But what if it's still the case that even so, when you follow up, or maybe during the meeting itself, right, the sales meeting, when they mention, oh, we have some budget constraint right now, or probably this is not something that we are looking for, right? So how, as a salesman, we navigate around these problems, right?
Well, like I said, I usually try to delay talking about the cost of the product in any detail until we're a little farther along, because I really want to look at the value first.
Agreed. Yes.
So once you've established the value, then at some point they come in and say, we just we can't afford it, and that's always a challenging part. I mean, any sales, because I mean my joke is, if it was whatever the price is, a lot of it's $10. Oh, we can't afford that. Can we pay $8? If it's $100,000, oh, we can't afford that. Can we pay $80,000? So I mean, that's going to be just a natural way, everyone. So you have to think about that in terms of your sales strategy and work out the best approach to that. And there are a number of ways to do that. I mean, one is, of course, you sell very hard on value, and you'd say, okay, we've shown the value. How do you make your decision on buying things? And this is part of the process. You want to find out. We're creatures of habit. We're organizations of habit. We have certain SOPs, and they would say, a lot of times I work with owners, say, we look at this, anything of this size, we analyze it, and if we get an ROI, return on investment, as an example, or payback of 1 year, then we'll put it in budget.
Right.
Payback of 3 years, then we may put it in a want-to file. And if you get a payback of 6 months or less, then we will budget for, so you have to find out what their criteria are and really understand with them. Say, look, this is great. How do you normally, maybe I can help. I can look at possibilities. How do you normally go through buying something like this? And also, you're also finding, are they the person that's going to buy it, or is there actually someone farther upstream that's going to have to okay it? And this is what I found. Sometimes I'm dealing with someone at an operational level. They understand the need for it. They even understand the benefits, but they're afraid to go and tell their boss they want to buy something for $100,000 a year, because he's not going to understand, and he's going, oh, why? So you want to understand what their process is, and then understand, can you help them to sell it? And so they may say, look, okay, normally the way we'd have to do it is, you'd send us a quote, and then we have to run through a justification process, and then it has to go through and you understand the process. Then you understand and think, okay, how can we work with you to do this more easily or do this faster? So occasionally, like they may say, yours is $100,000, anything $100,000 or more has to go through all this. And you say, well, maybe what we can do is unbundle it. We can give you, again, you have to work out your own strategy. We can give you the main part of it for just under $100,000, and then there's a follow-on piece once you've got it installed that we'll do later. So you have to think about this strategically. So you really have to work those questions through, but really understand their buying process, and whether the person you're talking with, where are they? Are they the decision maker?
Right.
Or someone farther up the decision maker? And sometimes it's worth saying, I don't know how your company works. I'm more than happy to come back and do a presentation with the decision maker.
Agree? Yeah.
Because maybe sometimes this guy is terrified to go tell his boss, but you can come in and present it in such a way the decision maker is going to go it. So I'll give you a kind of a funny example of that. I was working with these guys, and they had an old piece of equipment. This was hardware, but an old piece of equipment, and ours was a new piece of equipment. And we were trying to get a budget for them to replace all of the old equipment with the new. And they had like 5 units, and they bought one of ours, and they had 4 of the old ones. But ours was so clearly much, much better, newest, latest everything, had all the sorts of advantages. And the guy says, I don't know, we're going to have to go through a long process. Very hard to get this done and anything. And so they had a tour, and the president of the company, because this is a big company, came through. He walks in the lab. He says, why are all these pieces of equipment different? Well, this is the newest one, and it's this and this, and we just got it and really like it. It's this and this and this, and these are the old ones, and they're like not as good. And the guy says, so why don't we have all the new ones? Well, because they're like, it's going to cost us like $40,000 or $50,000 to do them all. And he goes, why are we even talking about it? Do it. So I mean, we kind of get intimidated at an operational level. We think these are big sums of money, but these guys look at it and say, at the end of the day, do it.
Precisely.
And as long as you have a good relationship at an operational level, these are the people that can do it. Another case, I came in one time, I gave a presentation to a plant manager, and it was like a nightmare presentation because everything had gone wrong. My equipment it was in Minnesota. My equipment had been in sub-zero weather overnight.
Right.
And it took like an hour and a half to warm
Yeah.
up, and everything's wrong. And they'd actually called me and told me not to come because it was so cold. And I'm like, I'm there anyway. I might as well come. I'm already in town. So I came in and I presented it to him, and he looks at it. We run some things. And we talk about it, and he says, I'll be back in a minute. Comes out 10 minutes later, walks in, and gives me a purchase order.
Oh.
And I'm like, really? Purchase order? He says, yeah, we need one. Here's a purchase order. So this guy, obviously, I was talking at that level. Again, this wasn't $50,000, $100,000 a year. This was 10 or 15,000. I was talking with someone that had the authority, and for him, it's just give him a PO.
Agree.
And so you're trying to reach those people at the right point, but you have to often do your groundwork perhaps at a lower level.
Agree.
But ultimately, those are the people that can say yes or no.
Agree.
Yeah.
I really like a point when you mentioned about, helping the operational people to, speak with maybe the decision maker.
Yeah. They may not let you, but you can also say, how can I help you? What do you need? Do you need a presentation? Can we write up something for you? What do you need to present to your boss that'll make this as easy as possible?
Agree. Yeah.
I'm happy to come on a call if you want, come into a live presentation, whatever it is. How do I help you do your job?
Agree. So yeah, that actually happened to us like last week.
Okay.
Very recent.
Yeah.
So, after we present to them, after we understand a little bit about the problems that they have.
Yeah.
The next problem that they say, their boss might not be as reasonable as them.
Okay.
So we have to,
they're playing good cop, bad cop.
good cop, bad
Okay.
cop.
Yeah, okay.
So that's why we are trying to craft out a presentation for them.
Yeah.
For them to present to the boss, and if things goes well, we'll then go down and present directly to their boss, and hopefully we'll sign the deals. So yeah, I think that is very relevant in a day-to-day situations as well. Trying to help the person that you're selling to, if they're not the decision maker, to convince the decision maker. So yeah, thanks so much.
And if they'll let you come in and help, that's
Yeah.
ideal sometimes. But
Agree.
if you can't, you have to empower them to do that. Yeah.
Agree. So
Okay.
that's true. But after these initial meetings, right, when you have already get them on board, maybe they're interested, right? Many times the process is not just a one-time meeting, right? There'll be a few meetings, follow-ups, so on and so forth. So how would you how you go about a problem where the customer sort of like ghosts you, stop replying to you, and how would you get the conversation to reinitiate it again, or never even get or keep the conversation going even after the first meeting, so that to prevent any ghosting from the customers as well?
Yeah, I mean, this is not easy because you don't. The problem with ghosting is you sometimes are not sure why they're ghosting. Everything looks like it's lined up.
Precisely.
And I mean, occasionally you can't do anything. I mean, just to be honest, sometimes you'll never know exactly what happened. Maybe that guy was, he was excited about it, but he wanted to talk to other people, and they said, "No way, this is going to happen. Just shut up and don't talk to this guy." I mean, I've had those happen before. In fact, I worked with a guy one time, one company, that happened. He ghosted me, and then like 2 years later, he was working in another company. He calls me up. He says, "I really liked your stuff. They wouldn't let me buy it at my old company, but now I want to buy it at my new company." Because
Right.
I was convinced, but no one else in my company was convinced. They didn't understand it. They didn't like it. They didn't want to spend money. They're willing to make do with what's happening. But I think, again, if you can create a sense of urgency, that's part of the process, which is always hard, is a sense of urgency. So again, the way we would run that, we would run a test case and show them, here's what we can, on a miniature part of what you're doing, here's how much we can benefit you. Here's that key piece. And, as long as you're not, in other words, I think the problem, you want to get them out of the mindset of saying, I can take as long as I need to make this decision. It doesn't cost us anything. Because a lot of times we think like that. You're wanting to pay $100,000. Well, as long as I put it off, I'm not paying the $100,000. And you're like, yeah. But I'm also now showing you that as long as you guys are putting it off, it's costing you $10,000 a week.
Right.
Or $5,000 a week
Right.
or whatever. So it's like, yeah, you're saving the $100,000, but while you're saving the $100,000, it's costing you this much money.
Right.
And I guess, again, you have to work out, understand it, depending on the culture and the people you're dealing with. I've known guys who will send it, say, It was great meeting you a few weeks ago, and I know you guys are excited about it. And I did a quick back of the napkin calculation, and if you'd had that software from the time we had the meeting until now, and we're able to operate at full efficiency, our back of the napkin calculation is it would have saved you, half the cost of the software already.
Yeah.
Again, it's in black and white, and they believe it or they don't believe it. Maybe they disagree with it, but hopefully you've done your homework and you've been able to show them the benefit. And so every day they're not using your tech,
Yeah.
you're saying it's costing them money. It's not a zero. It's not like buying a car where I can drive this car for another year. This is a real. Your company is bleeding every day something by not having it, and somehow diplomatically and nicely you need to make sure they understand that, and that's kind of always in front of them.
Yeah, agree. So that's a good point as well, because I feel like many people, will buy into the idea of prevent a loss, then gaining something.
But if you think, in a sense, what we're telling you now is you're losing something every day. Now, the funny thing is, I had one guy, I said, we're going to put this in. Why don't we do a presentation to your boss? And he goes, I can't present that to my boss. I said, why? He said, he'll fire me because I've been losing all this money for the company in the last few years. I said, no, it's not your fault. You don't have the right tools.
Yeah.
And that's it. We're not talking about the people. You have great people. You need this new tool. And with this new tool, you can do this.
Agree.
And so as long as the boss understands that, we're not pointing fingers at anybody. If you had the right tool, you can do the right job. But it's like saying, if you're supposed to be driving screws in and I only give you a hammer, well, your screw threads are going to be pretty messed up. So it's this kind of a thing. But you have to be able to, you have to think through that and read the situation.
I agree. You have to convince them in that sense that it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Which is mostly the case, right?
Yeah.
Many people don't have the right tools to improve their operations.
Right.
But they're just too afraid to communicate that to the boss because that may cost them their job, right? So it's actually a very common problem.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of convincing actually to these people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you've started, sometimes if you can get more than one person into the conversation early on, and multiple people are hearing this, it's harder for, what you don't really try to avoid, if possible, if you can, is to avoid just one person being the sole gatekeeper and has to come through him or her. And only he has the information and everything comes in. I've needed a high need locus of control. Even back before emails and things, I would try to say, who's the group of people that are kind of involved in it? And I would CC them on all my mails.
Right.
Again, you have to feel that out, make sure you're not upsetting anyone. But if three people, then one guy can't kind of like close it down because other people are going to say, hey, John, we're looking at that a few weeks ago. You guys get doing, but it looks like that really would help us a lot. And then he has a bit more trouble saying he can't hide it.
Precisely.
So again, you have to look at the dynamics of the situation you're in.
Yeah, I agree. Totally. So afterwards, right, after, you also give them some kind of trial, like what you mentioned earlier. Give them a little bit of taste, right, on how exactly the solution will work. Typically in this, in a big value tickets, right, they request for like a pilot projects, for example, especially in the manufacturing sector, right?
Okay.
It is still debatable topic today whether that pilot project should be a free one or should be a paid pilot project, you know. But ideally, of course, as a company, you always try to go for a paid pilot project, right?
At least enough to cover your costs of doing it, so it's not
precisely. But oftentimes the companies or the customers will ask for a free pilot, so on and so forth. When these things happens, how would you advise one person to go about this? Try to convince that even though there is pilot, at least certain price to be paid to keep the pilot going.
So let's step back again. I think the pilot, the free trial, the free sample, some of these things, you always have to look at it from the position of like, okay, that's great. We're happy to talk about any approach to getting this because obviously here we're here to help you. We think this will help you enormously.
Yeah.
And we obviously would like to provide this solution to you. So what are they proposing with the trial? In other words, what you want to be sure is with a trial or anything that you're not getting a dead end where they're saying, okay, we're going to kind of do a trial and then we'll just kind of like, it'll never kind of see the light of day. We'll kind of play with it. Oh, it didn't really work. And then we just go off and, do things the way we're doing it. So you really want to say, let's discuss that. And, if it's a very simple trial where there's very little cost, maybe we do some simulations remotely or something, then you might say, fine, we'll do that for free.
Agree.
If there's going to be a cost involved, then you kind of have to say, just to be, just be really fair, just like any company, we have to cover, this is a substantial cost. We have limited resources. We're trying to help a lot of people. We're happy to do this with you. But can we get some money budgeted to offset the cost or to cover the cost of doing this? We're not, you may say, we're not really going to make much money on this. It's not our job. This is not a money making for us, but it's just to help us defray our costs. And here's what we're willing to do. And you think about it from their perspective. We're going to do that. If we can get a firm commitment at the end, and again, be creative, like a firm commitment at the end, that at the end of the trial, here's what we're going to do. We've agreed on, we do X. At the end, we get these results. It does this. Then we're going to go ahead and move on from the trial to a free. I worked in cases before. One time where we did that, and we said, we'll charge you for the trial, but at the end of the trial, we'll credit all that money back to the final purchase of the product. So it won't cost you any more. But we only want to do the trial as a part of getting you to buy the final product. It's not a thing in itself. We're not lawyers. We're not into trials all the time. That's a bad joke. But anyway, so we really, the trial is for a purpose. And once we keep that in mind, you make sure they're not dead-ending you or running you around a corner or something. And then you say, but anytime we do the trial, we want to make sure we got an agreement and, clear agreement up front, hopefully in writing, of how it's going to go. And then, like I said, then you'd say, okay, you could take an approach like, if you, for example, let's say the trial's going to cost $10,000, and then the first year license for the software is going to be $100,000. You'd say, we're happy to credit all or half of that towards the license fee because we don't want to make money on the trial. That's not our goal.
Right.
But we understand you have to step by this, and if you go through this whole process, it'll be a lot of work to get it there. And it doesn't turn out to be effective, then, for whatever, you don't like it or whatever, we're fine, we'll walk away, no problem. But we can't do that and lose money.
Agree. Actually, that's a very good tactic,
Yeah, that's one tactic. And then the other thing is always look at other ways. So an example, I had a company that asked for that one time and in a software product, and I said, what if we could go visit someone, and again, some industries this works, some industries it doesn't.
Yeah.
What if I can get permission for you to go visit a company that's already using it, and you can see it in operation, see what they're doing. And again, this is probably when you're a little farther along and more mature. If you have good relations, sometimes people won't do it. Very competitive industries, very competitive companies, they may not, but occasionally that'll work. That's a side step. Or get the guy on the phone with someone who's using it. Again, you have to feel out. You don't want to get anybody in trouble. You want to make sure that that's all copacetic. But I've done that before. And that satisfies them. As long as I go in and see someone actually using it.
Yeah.
So I had some guys in Central America. I was in the U.S., and they wanted to license the software. And they said, can you come down here? It was very expensive to me, make a trip down and do the work with them. And I said, I can't really. But I said, are you guys in the States anytime soon? Yeah. Well, why don't you meet me in Milwaukee, and I'll take you up to see. This was actually Johnsonville sausage that they sell here in Singapore.
All right, yeah.
I sold a software package, and we went up and they visited and saw how they were using it and discussed it with the people and had an hour, had some coffee, and that was enough. I didn't have to fly down to Central America. They just wanted the comfort level that it was real, people were really using it, and some companies similar to theirs, and that was enough ammunition for them to justify getting it.
Yeah, there's sort of like a, in B2C market as well, other reviews by other customers, right?
But a live presentation, particularly high ticket items, alive. Of course, then I had a guy, one time I did that, he says, they're welcome to come see my plant if I can come see theirs.
Okay.
But again, these are ways to think around it. So you're always trying to say the purpose of the trial is to get here, and I don't want to get everything focused on arguing, debating about the cost of the trial. So sometimes if they really are arguing, we don't want to pay, we want it for free, it means that you probably haven't convinced them of the value of the final product. They're not quite there, and they're saying, we're sure it'll fail in the trial, so then we won't have to get the product, and it's another impediment. But you don't want it positioned that way. They need to be confident that the final product's going to work, and this is just the final proof.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree totally. I mean, the tactics that you mentioned earlier, these are, I think, some tips that be very useful, not only to myself, but any other founders or
Yeah.
sales team that are doing big ticket sales.
But it's always this idea we are aligned together.
Yeah.
We're all trying to get to the same place.
Agree.
We're on the seller side, you're on the buyer side, but we all have the same goal, which is to make your plant
Right.
better or make your life better in some way.
I agree. One more thing that's related, that's in terms of negotiations or the financials, right? Of course, as a company, you have a certain pricing for your products, but how do you know, in negotiating with your clients, what's the pricing to start with? When should you back down from that, and how can you avoid being lowball or highball, right? In that sense, some kind of tactics or tips would be quite grateful from your experience.
Again, at the end of the day, on all these things, you're selling value.
Agree.
So if you can quantify the value, that's part of the process. So, okay, we're charging you $100,000, but this will save you $250,000, $300,000 a year, whatever. So you say it's a really good payback. And I would come in and really try to understand. There's a generic cost objective. Everyone always wants to get things for less, but sometimes the cost objection is a signal of something else. Like, I'm not really convinced of your product,
Right.
or I'm really don't want to go to bat for it, or whatever. So if I can get you to, either you don't come down to my price, or I won't come up to your price, then we're kind of frozen, and I can put it off again. So again, you always have to understand with a company you're working with, and that there's a dynamic to that. But you kind of have to say at the end of the day that, this is our pricing. And I think the other thing in all of this is that, I worked in a company one time where we had a practice. The head had a practice. He would focus on a very small number of accounts at one time. And then you really became desperate because you had to close almost all these accounts. His approach was you totally focus on these few accounts, you close them, then you go on and get a few more accounts and you close them. And I said, but that's not the way sales work. You need to have a lot of guys in the pipeline.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, in a lot of these areas, if someone says, look, we just can't come up with 100,000. Then you just say, okay, now we've shown you the value, and based on what you told me before, it's going to get this kind of an ROI payback. Can you share with me what it is about the price of it? What it is specifically about the price, why is it, and some, if it's over $100,000, I've got to go through like 97 hoops, and it has to go to world headquarters or whatever. And then you have, at least if that's really the objection, it's not price per se, it may be process.
Yeah.
And then you'd say, okay, and if you really feel that that's it, so you'd say, so you're saying if we could take care of that process, you're no problem, you guys would buy it. If we could address that issue, and then, yes, okay, then can you solve that problem? So for example, can we unbundle it into two systems? There's a stage one we put in, get you going, get it up to, and then a year later, you get in stage two. Stage one is going to be 90,000. Stage two is going to be another 30,000. Stage one will get you a fair amount of the value, maybe not all of it, but stage two. So you have to think about that in terms of, and then if they say, no, that still wouldn't do it, then there's something else. There's still some objection besides the one they've given you. But you keep trying to find what is it that the real problem is. I don't trust it. It's too hard in process-wise. I don't want to make the changes. I'm whatever. You're always trying to figure out what's the reason for it besides just everyone generically wants stuff cheaper than you're going to ask for it. The other point, maybe they say we just don't have the money available in budget.
Yeah.
And then you have to look and say, okay, then, are there budgets you can tap on? In other words, we represent upper management. Almost every company has money they can tap on, or they'll take out, in rare occasions, they'll lease it or license, they'll borrow money to pay for it if it's really valuable. I know there are ways to do this, but if we really are interested and you're a viable, you're a going concern, there's probably a way to do this. Then the last thing would be you guys have to decide eventually, we worked on this, are you willing to say, okay, we can break it down, as an example, break it down into a monthly license where we charge you in pieces. But again, that's kind of your very last. You don't want to start changing it because then you have billing issues, and what if they don't pay on time and things like that.
I agree. Yeah.
So a lot of this is really the dynamics, but you really want to understand what the objection is. Is it the price itself? If you've shown the value, what is the problem? And you keep coming back. We've shown you this value at this price. So what is it? Because we've shown you the value. What is the price? And then you ferret out there's some other issue, or they're just generically being cheap.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, there are lots of factors, right? And one thing that you mentioned earlier, that because they don't want to change, I feel like there's something that is even more fundamental.
So you have to find, this is back to the point, you have to find within the management, you have to find the change agent at the level, and maybe a level above or two above the people you're talking to.
That's
And
right.
that's where I often found I got stuck in big ticket sales, is you would get the guys that really worked day to day and really kind of understood the problem. And even though they kind of at some level understood the cost, the fact that it cost the company $100,000 a year and you've got something that's going to cost me $20,000 to solve that, I'm focused on the $20,000, not the $100,000. Whereas if you get to the boss, like I mentioned this guy one time, he'll say, why are we even talking about this? If it's going to save us this much money and it's going to cost us this much money, let's do it.
Precisely.
So you want to, ideally in an organization, you try to find someone who's at that decision-making level, has the big picture of what's going on in the company. And that may be, you need to try to bring them into the conversation earlier. And I've done that before. I'd say, great, you're the lab guys. Who else makes decisions on this? Who else would kind of KIV, what's purchased for the lab? Oh, it's actually the director of processing. Oh, can he come in? Or the plant manager would need to be involved. Is there a way at the end of this meeting, can we bring him in for kind of a brief part? The presentation. Again, it depends on is he there or not. Or can we have a quick Zoom call? Because I think it'd be good to bring him in and get his thoughts and questions. Because what I don't want to do is us go through all this work, and then when he sees what we're doing, there's some question we needed to answer for him. So again, you have to understand the dynamics of the organizations. I know Asian companies are a little different than American companies, but at the end of the day, everyone wants things to run better.
Agree.
People that are higher in the organization usually are tasked with it. It looks good for them if they improve the performance of the company.
That's true. But what if the person you're talking to is trying to block you from speaking with the decision maker?
That's why I said I usually talk to several different people.
Right.
And I mean, at the end of the day, you can't get around that. I mean, you can decide. Rare occasions I've seen guys do what they call, this is a Hail Mary, which is in football, which is like you just throw the ball and hope someone grabs it and takes it into the end zone. It's a Hail Mary. They'll try a Hail Mary, which means they may go around this guy and reach the boss.
Right.
But that's dangerous. I mean, that's a really extreme case. That's really dangerous. And usually, if you haven't set it up and if you get stalled at that level, there may not be at the end of the day a lot you can do. But you keep your eyes open. You regularly reach out to him. You're always featuring the value. So I'll give you one case. I was talking with a guy for years about selling equipment. I visited him several times. Always really nice guy, have coffee. Yeah, I'm really pushing to get your product in. We really want to use it. Yeah, we really need it. And I thought, well, he's really my advocate here, but I just can't get him to come up with money. Okay. So a few months later, I'm at a trade show and I meet a young woman, and she's like a lawyer. She's the daughter of the family that owns the company. She's come back to work for the company. And one of her things is to come through and say, where can we make the company run better?
Right.
And so she's looking for everything, and she sees my equipment, and she says, I think we'd be interested in that. I don't know this business yet. I'm just learning it, but I think we... And I said, actually, I've talked with one of your guys. Really? I've never heard anything about this. So she says, when you're in Detroit next time, come on in. I want you to have a meeting. So I come in, and we have a meeting with her and some of the other managers and this guy. And when I have that meeting, this guy actually turns around and starts arguing that they don't need the equipment. This was my friend that I thought was trying to help, the guy that's pushing it. And he's like, oh, it's so expensive. Oh, no. And she says, no, we need this equipment. This is something we really need to do our job right. And finally, he backed down. But I realized the guy I thought was my advocate really was he was a nice guy. He was being a nice guy to me, but he really wasn't. And I had to reach someone. In that case, I reached someone higher in the organization.
Right.
So those are the things to look at.
Agree.
You might find the guys that are higher in the organization and invite them to your webinar.
Yeah, that's true.
That would be a very diplomatic way to do that.
That's true. That's true. So kind of find a way around finding the right people to speak
without
with.
trying to purposely bypass this guy.
Agree.
I can't help it. Your boss came to this meeting. He's really excited about it now.
Precisely. So yeah, I mean now I think we covered the entire sales process. How should one go about it and improve it. Just to wrap things around the entire process, right? This is a lengthy process in terms of big ticket sales. Any suggestions, lastly, to see how can you shorten this sales process, right? Because for a startup, time and resource is a luxury to us. So we need to close fast, and we need to be able to close bigger deals. So any suggestions on how we can shorten the sales process?
If I had the magic answer to that, we could start a company. We both would be wealthy. But generically, I mean, again, it comes back. You really have to understand when you're meeting the company the first time how rigid is their time process.
Yeah.
So some of these companies, my joke is some of these companies, if you follow the process, you let it kind of run its own path, it'll take a year. If you do all these kinds of things to speed it up and push and really drive it, everything, it'll take 12 months. It's a joke. I mean, it's the same, but you feel like, really? So you really need to understand, is there anything you can do? And if there's like, hey, your sense is, I can stand on my head and spit $50, but nothing is going to happen. This is going to take that long. Then you may just have to kind of let it run and go work with other ones where doing some things may move it faster. So don't spend your time. You have to kind of read the company and say that. But on the other hand, with some companies, if you really think these guys are really interested, it seems like a really good fit, they seem like they're in the right place to do it. I mean, this is kind of the approach I've taken occasionally. Again, you're a startup.
Yeah.
So like, I know you'd like to go through the 1-year process. What do we need to do to move that faster? Because every day you're losing money. So, how in the past have you guys been able to short circuit the process? Because I'm sure you've had things in the past the company's gotten where you didn't you didn't go the normal procurement process and go through all the steps and everything. How did you do that? And how can we help you do that? And and again, maybe you have to cut the cost. But then at least then they'd say, well, if this is just so expensive, but if it were like half the price, I could get it in tomorrow. And you'd say, okay, I bet I can get it for half the price for the first. I'm just saying that's just your decision whether you're going to do that. But you have to give something to get it in, or if we could pay for it, and So you're trying to understand from them, how did they do that before, and what do you as a selling organization need to do to get that? And obviously, you're trying to look for ways where you're not going to give up money, but maybe timed payments. Maybe give them 90 days. Something that you can do that you can get it in and give a little bit and get it in now.
Yep.
But you have to understand that. And again, you're back to the value. I know it takes a year from you guys, but we just calculated just now, based on what we're seeing, that in a year, your company will have lost this much money, like 5 times the cost of the software. So given that, is there any way, if it can't, we can't, we understand, we'll follow the procurement process, I understand that. But is there anything we can do to speed this up? How have you guys done this in the past to get something faster?
I agree.
And it's worth a try. And again, you're not, think about, I always really careful about cutting costs or cutting price or anything. That's your very last thing. And you only do it with if we can do that kind of, can you hand me a purchase order today? I mean, almost that kind of, I can only do it now and only on that basis. If you want to go for long term, then it's going to go back into everything will be the regular price.
That makes sense. Yeah. I think that really helps. So from the discussion that we have, it boils down to a lot of understanding exactly who your customers are. How's their process like, getting to know them so that you can also help them, right? Support them the entire process as well. And sales is just not pitching and hard selling your product or solutions. It's basically being there for the customers to help them and guide them throughout the entire process. So that's been a very grateful and great insights I get from you, Kris.
Okay.
Hopefully we'll be able to implement some of these advice into our sales process directly.
Okay.
And thanks so much, Kris, for your time. And
so they used to end some of these conferences I go to, when they finish, they go, Now, good selling.
Good selling.
Good selling.
It's like
Okay.
a cult.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Good
All right,
talking to you.
awesome. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Kris.